And share my screen.
And while Megan is doing that, we're not actually here to talk about donuts as in the confectionery treat, but if you would like to share your favorite donut in the chat, feel free, um, just as a fun little like bonus icebreaker.
Okay. Is are the slides looking, can you see the full screen sort of version? Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Ish. Yeah, I see a
Perfect.
little bit of the navigation part at the top, but we see the
Okay.
mostly your presentation.
Okay. I think that's the best I'm going to do for the moment. So I'll call that good enough. Um, okay. Yeah. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be talking about accounting for the donut, thinking and systems and changing the goal in accounting practice. And you'll see there's this little logo here for Global Donut Days. So we're kind of Adam and I are part of a local organization, but it's part of kind of this international organization that organizes a few days a year for these global donut days to kind of help spread the word and kind of so that's part of the timing of what we've kind of planned for this is kind of to help spread the word about that. And if after hearing some of this you want to find out more, the next couple days there's lots of kind of related events happening and there's lots of other resources online. So just a note, there's more if you want to keep digging. But first, a little bit about Adam and I. Adam, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, yeah. So my career has been kind of all over the place, but I currently work in the civic tech sector for a number of nonprofits. Um, and I have been an advocate for improving our tech and economic policies to develop a more sustainable and generative economy for the past 5 or 6 years. And got involved in donut economics advocacy back in like 2022. And I've been really excited to see the progress we've made so far in growing the community.
Awesome. And my name is Megan Stachura. I'm based near Seattle on a small island. And my background is using data to kind of inform decision making, originally kind of in the environmental sciences and fishery sciences. And through that, kind of collaborated with economists and kind of have had more of an interest in kind of how economics and social systems really impact all of our environmental and like other systems and have moved into other realms like financial technology and healthcare, but don't have experience in accounting in particular. But I'm excited to kind of think about how some of these ideas that I've been excited about donor economics kind of come into play in that realm. And I'll just mention there's a little logo kind of at the bottom here for our Seattle Donut Economics Coalition. And that's kind of what has brought Adam and I together and kind of connected us with other folks locally in our area to kind of to think more about these sorts of ideas. So for we have about an hour and a half together today. This first maybe next 15 minutes, we'll give you an introduction to what donut economics is, and kind of give a few like examples of kind of how it can be applied to help spark your kind of your thinking and provide a few kind of questions to think about, and then we'll break into small groups to spend 30 minutes kind of discussing a case study that's around donut economics. And then our last 30 minutes, we'll come back all together as a group and try to kind of share those ideas and kind of build on what we've all learned. So as Matthew kind of alluded to earlier, maybe you're thinking about like this donut, like the donut, the food. I think for me especially, it's right around lunchtime here on the west coast of the U.S. So you might be thinking about the yummy pastries, which kind of we're not talking about that, but the shape of it is kind of what has in common with the idea of donut economics. So you kind of you see this visualization on the right side, and that's kind of where the name donut economics gets its name. And it's kind of the base, like central part of a lot of the ideas behind this. see the visualization, we've kind of got that donut shape, which represents the safe and just space for economy for humanity. And so within that visual, we have like there's two concentric circles. There's an inner circle which represents a social foundation, and so this is to ensure that no one is left falling short of life's essentials, like falling short into the donut. And these are based on the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, are kind of the basic things that people should have to be thriving. And then there's also this outer circle representing the ecological ceiling. And that's to ensure that humanity does not overshoot the planetary boundaries that protect Earth's life supporting systems. And those are based on Stockholm Resilience Center's planetary boundaries work. And so this kind of brings together both the social and the ecological sides of what humanity needs to thrive. And so that kind of the last image is like kind of just an example of kind of what the visualization looks like. This like gives you kind of where we are right now in our kind of at a global scale. And this visualization actually just got released in the last few weeks. There's a 20 just this new data it's the most recent data is based on only goes through 2022, but you can kind of see based on this in the outer circle we have on like a decent portion of the factors we're overshooting our ecological limits. And then in the inner circle, we have on all except for this one where it's graded, we don't have data, where we have shortfall in our ecological limits. And so kind of the value of this visualization is to help us understand where are we overshooting and kind of can and or falling short, that we can address that and kind of the degree to which we're doing that. And so you can look at this on like a global scale, like this visualization does, or you could look at this on for your organization, for your business, for your city. We're working on a similar thing for like a Seattle city portrait that's kind of building a similar visualization. So it's kind of this is a tool for kind of visualizing and communicating where we sit and kind of how we can improve in working towards this world where everyone can thrive. And so that visualization is kind of just a part of the work, but it's really about a larger mindset of what we need to get to this ecologically safe and socially just space. And so there's these 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist that were introduced in this book, Donut Economics by Kate Breworth back in 2017. And then she founded this international group, the Donut Economics Action Lab, that kind of is helping to coordinate on a global scale and kind of supporting local groups like our group in Seattle. And so there's these 7 principles that kind of are helping to frame our thinking and kind of rethinking from maybe traditional economics or mainstream economics into like the kind of a new form of economics that can actually get us to this world where everyone can thrive. And so one of the biggest parts of that is changing the goal from one of growth. So like our economy recently has been focused on things like gross domestic product, and how do we maximize monetary value and continue to grow our economy in this monetary way. And central to donut economics is changing the goal from that to kind of let's get within this donut. But in order to do that, we kind of have to change the way we've been thinking. One of the biggest things is kind of part of this way we've been operating is like a mechanical way of thinking, just like everything's linear, simplifying systems with the aim of predicting and controlling outcomes. Whereas we're trying to embrace the dynamic complexity, the unpredictability of these complex systems and the interconnections, and how we can kind of utilize those interconnections to kind of help all to thrive. So that's our kind of how we getting savvy with systems is kind of understanding better how those dynamic systems are working and how we can kind of work with those. Um, and
And
then,
in particular, Megan, if you don't mind me cutting
yep,
in,
yeah,
that's a reflection on how much of traditional economics has focused on like just looking at the small part of the picture to try to simplify the math, basically. And when you take that myopic view, it definitely makes the math simpler, which the economists love, but you miss something, right? You're not seeing the bigger picture. And so one of that, yeah. So donut economics is really focused on that idea of like looking more broadly and see what do we miss when we look so narrowly at specific phenomena.
Mhm. Yes, definitely. I think there's like these visualizations kind of get a little bit more like the ecological connections and like of all of these systems. And so kind of these seven principles of donut economics, if we kind of summarize them in a few words, their goal is to work towards a diverse and embedded economy of socially adaptable humans, where we kind of embrace the unpredictability of complex systems and their interconnections. We work with the cycles of the living world and we share the opportunity and value with all who create it. So kind of we have the interconnections like the kind of this graph on the right kind of shows how we can be a web of a bunch of different systems that kind of work together, and that kind of feeds into an example that Adam's going to talk about next, an organization where it is really like operating as that sort of interconnected system. You can see kind of like this image on the right, thinking about how do we work as part of the system with the environment around us and all of the energy and the waste and the heat, and how are we thinking about how that all cycles in a way that we can regenerate from that and not just like have everything turn into waste. Um, I'll let you go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, and so that idea of sharing the value and opportunity with those who co-create it is really powerful. And unfortunately, it's hard to find examples in our current environment where people are really embracing that principle and idea. But one really fascinating example is Mondragon Corporation, which is this collection of cooperatives that emerged in northern Spain during the period of Spain's recovery post the Spanish Civil War. Um, and they basically, the way that it works is everyone who lives in the region has like effectively like citizenship into the corporation, and so they'll try to find a job for you somewhere. They have like a bank, a local bank. They have a university. They have different companies that manufacture certain globally competitive goods, and uh, they do like a really interesting set of sharing of both like resources from a financial side of things, from like the knowledge side of things, and also from the labor side of things. So if you get a job somewhere in one of the co-ops and you're not fitting in for whatever reason, they'll try to place you somewhere else in one of the other co-ops before, moving on. And because they're all co-ops, like every employee also has some ownership of those businesses and like receives a share of the net profits in the end. This leads to like much more equitable pay structures. They have, I mean, the CEOs do get paid more than the line workers, but not like, you know, 100 times more, like in several like in a normal American corporation. Um, so yeah, I mean, this model is clearly designed to distribute, which is one of the donut economics thinking principles. It also is incorporating systems thinking because they are, not just building one company that is trying to, compete in one market. They're building a network of companies that are supporting each other and, you know, have some built-in resiliency if there is a downturn in a market that impacts, one or several of the businesses that they oversee. There will be some subset that are less impacted, and they can kind of like carry the load during that downturn. Um, and then last but not least, they're also clearly very aware of this idea of the embedded economy, where they don't see themselves as a business that is independent of the community that they're residing around and within, they see themselves as an integral part of that community. And investments in supporting the flourishing of the people within that community pay significant returns in the way that in the company's own functioning, right? Um, and yeah, they've been they've been very successful over the years and have built this like stable system and have become globally competitive in several sectors, which is very interesting and certainly flies in the face of conventional wisdom about like how cutthroat you have to be to succeed in global trade and global business. Can we go to the next slide, Megan? Um, so with that example out of the way, I wanted to introduce this case study that we're going to discuss a bit further in the breakout rooms. And has anybody heard of a mutual credit network before? Feel free to raise your hand or post in the chat. Um, okay, so I see a few hands. So for those who have not, um, a mutual credit network is basically instead of using money uh, or barter or some other form of trade, you transact on credit. So um, you know, and anthropologists believe that this is a a time bank is an example. I don't know that I could articulate the differences from like a generic mutual credit network and a time bank specifically. I'd have to do a little bit more research into time banks before answering that. But yeah, anthropologists believe that barter was never really a viable trade mechanism, and so you know our common perception of pre-currency societies is that they just bartered all the time. That's generally believed to be a myth amongst anthropologists. And in fact, what most communities did was have these robust mutual credit networks. And that's supported by the fact that many of the first examples of human writing are basically just accounting ledgers of what everybody in the community owes each other in terms of various goods or labor or what have you. Uh, Maybe an easy way to conceive of how mutual credit networks work is think about like a traditional bar tab, right? You're not paying for every beer that you get at the bar. And back in the olden days, you might not pay for weeks or months. And when you're ready to settle up with your bartender, it'll be like, okay, well, I helped wash the dishes one week, and I when my harvest came in, I shared a bunch of bread with you, and you that's kind of how the mutual credit networks take the ideas of barter and make them actually feasible over like the scope of at least a local community. Now, there's an interesting property of mutual credit networks in contrast to currency, which is that mutual credit networks require a degree of trust and accountability. So they work well when you have a small community of people where everybody knows each other. And if somebody is not, carrying their weight in terms of contributing to the community versus what they're taking out of the community, that person is going to be admonished in some way. Um, and but if you're like a stranger to the community, like they can't know that you're going to contribute, and so there's an element of distrust. An advantage of fiat currency is that it's like, oh well, your coin is just as good as the next person's, right? Um, and so that was what allowed economies to scale more broadly when money was invented. But there was something lost along the way as well, in the sense that since you're no longer dependent on that trust, you're not incentivized to build that trust within a community. And so one of the beautiful things about a mutual credit network is that it creates a bunch of pro-social reinforcement mechanisms that everybody is interacting with on a daily basis as they transact and interact within the local economy. Um, so let's move to the next slide. Um, a modern example of something that resembles a mutual credit network and has a lot of the benefits of a mutual credit network. There's this concept called community currencies. And there's a recent example here in Washington during the pandemic where this small little town started producing these wooden vouchers that you could only spend at local businesses. So basically, the city government created a program where they gave a bunch of vouchers to people in the community, and then they told businesses you can redeem those vouchers with us for US dollars if you accept them at your stores to sell whatever. And what what made this program really successful is that it was stimulating of only the local economy, right? And the like stimulus checks would come in and people would buy stuff on Amazon, right? And so that's not staying within the community. The community currency would be used only at the local bank or at the local bread shop or wherever, right? And that kept the money flowing and stimulated the economic activity within Tenino specifically, and that's what made it such a successful program. Uh, but similar to a mutual credit network, this required a degree of trust and interconnectedness and knowledge of the people who were there. Like I'm sure that they tried to do a little bit to ensure that these were not easily counterfeited. But like at the same time, I think there was just like a lot of trust in the system and in the people who were involved, which only worked well because it was a small community. So if we go to the next slide, uh, now I'm not an accountant, and neither is Megan, and we're interested and wondering and hoping that we could explore this idea of mutual credit networks with some of you folks who are well versed in accounting to identify what are some given our access to modern technology and modern accounting principles, is there a mechanism by which we could design a mutual credit network that would maybe scale to a larger group than just like a small town of 200 people? Um, but in order to get there, we have some questions to talk about in the breakout rooms, which are meant to encourage thinking about the evolution of this idea, how it would be applied in practice, what a ledger might look like, or if there are non-ledger accounting ways to navigate this problem. And we recognize that these are kind of like big, bold, scary questions. And so we also are happy to and excited to talk about community currencies. And we have a bit more targeted, a few more targeted questions in that realm. Matthew?
Yeah, and before we jump into the breakout rooms, I want to kind of create some space here, right? Because first of all, I know some of you, this is the first time you might be hearing about any of this, and so this is all like brand new information, and so we want to acknowledge that and create space for inquiry around that. Two, some of us are different types of accountants, right? So we might have different responses or answers to some of these questions and ideas. And generally speaking, some of you are relatively new to the Accounting Alchemy Network, and I know we're sort of dropping into this rather perhaps I would say intermediate conversation on the application of regenerative accounting principles to this thing called donut economics, which is not a 101 course. Let's just be clear about that, right? And so I want to create some space, and I know some of us in this space have been practicing and developing concepts and approaches towards regenerative accounting, some of us inside of the AAN, some of us outside of the AAN. So I want to create a little bit of space for folks in the room to just ask some general questions, gain some clarity before we move into breakout rooms. And that being said, I did make sure that there were at least 1 to 2 known accountants in each breakout room. So we have some structure around that, but just opening up the floor to see if there are any questions or curiosities from those that are in the room so far. And if not, that's fine. We can just jump right in. But I want to create the space for y'all first. Any questions? Are we all ready to dive into our breakout rooms? All right, I see a thumbs up. Can I get some more thumbs up just so I know? Okay, all right, I see some more thumbs up going. Okay, got it. So here's what I'm gonna do. Let me just tidy up my breakout rooms for a moment here so that we are all good. And I'm seeing some people are ready to not do breakout rooms. That's fine. 1 second here. Give me 2 moments. Okay, that's a good room. That's a solid room. Okay, let me move one person over here. I'm gonna move you over here. Okay, I think we're almost there.
And maybe I'll just give this also short instructions. I've
Please,
pasted all of
please.
the questions into the chat, so you guys will play. You can reference that as you go because I know there's a lot there, and I'll say like kind of get what you can pick from them, what seems interesting to you. I know like there's a lot of different directions I think you could go with this, and I think it'll be interesting to see when we get back from the breakout rooms, kind of learning from what the other groups and like what combination of people happen to begin there. We'll probably get different insights, but feel free to kind of take it in whatever direction is interesting to you. And maybe we'll just start. You'll have 30 minutes. You'll start with short introductions to kind of get a sense for who's in the room, go through those questions, and then I just also shared in the chat a Google Doc with where you can add in notes. There's the questions are also in there and a link to all the slides and also kind of a spot for you to add a few bullet points if you want to, as you're talking, you want to kind of add some stuff in there so that that helps remind us what you want to share when we get back to the whole group.
Okay, got it. All right, so I think I have the breakout rooms as best as I can get them. I'm gonna join, let's see, I'm gonna move you, Adam, to breakout room 2. I'm gonna join room 1, and I'm gonna put this person in room 1. Okay, so I'm gonna join room 1. So if you're in room 1, I'll be there in just a moment. Otherwise, we've got 4 rooms, and most of them have 3 or 4 people in them. So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms, and we'll get this party started. And we have, what, 30 minutes, you said?
Yep. Do you want to just set it to automatically close at that point, Matthew?
Yeah, I will take care of that. Yeah,
Okay, sounds good.
okay.
Okay,
Awesome. All
thank
right,
you.
opening up the breakout rooms. Hello.
Yeah.
Hi. Welcome, welcome. So let's get started, shall we? I'm not intending to be a facilitator, but I facilitating. So if you please, by all means, feel free to jump in and do whatever you'd like. Let's start off with introduction, shall we? And Vincent, would you like to go first?
Okay, so Vincent, I'm from Switzerland. Um, I was working for a CPG company for more than 28 years.
Mm,
And 2 years ago, we have a restructuration, and I say, okay, I do introspection. And being a lean specialist, visiting 300 sites, operation excellence, and that was not enough. So we were doing lean, and lean often has this issue as people think short term, and lean is not compatible with short term.
mm,
And in my introspection, I find different things, and one of them was the donuts. And the donuts was really bringing some things we could share with people to um, to sell the lean in a more positive way.
mm,
So is where am I? I use more, if you want, the donuts as donuts thinking, like the lean thinking.
mm,
And is why I'm joining some of this Donuts Day today to know a bit more, to be exposed and to meet people that with who we could certainly connect and share our networks.
mm.
So mathematician, not accounting. Most what you say is quite brand new for me. So don't worry if I lose a few hairs that is still on my head.
Wonderful. Awesome. And how do you say your name? Is it Gilia?
Giulia
Julia. Okay, Julia. Okay.
is an
Awesome.
Italian name. Okay. Hi, I am Giulia. I work at Swansea University in UK, and where I am lecturer in accounting and finance. Before this job, I was working as a chartered accountant and auditor in Italy and in Luxembourg.
Mm,
So when I joined Swansea 10 years ago,
mm,
I didn't know about the hedonic economics, to be honest with you. The hedonic economic is that 3 years, 3 or 4 years, where I jumped into, I get to know hedonic economics through one of my colleagues,
mm,
which is really into the sustainability part of the university. She's tried to make sure that sustainability is embedded everywhere.
mm,
And what I like of the donor economy is I try to embed it when I teach financial accounting,
mm,
which, to be honest with you, at the beginning was kind of a trigger because I had to properly understand it and try to make sure, I try to, what I had to do is try to, because though, it, I didn't thought that it would have been easy from a student point of view to associate the, let me say, the climate change, the framework of the donor economic,
mm,
and let me say, asset liability, equity, no, expenses and income, no?
mm,
And so how I did it, I used the donor that you use in this presentation,
mm,
and usually I try to do some card games with the students
mm,
to give them scenario, and I ask them, what would you do? What would be the option that you would choose?
mm,
And so we
mm,
look on the positive and the negative effect. And I say there is not right or wrong option,
mm,
is because it's really, if you're going to be an accountant for a company or a CFO for a company, is really sometimes decision are subjective and depend also on the strategy of the company.
mm,
So to be honest with you, I use this framework a lot for playing and making students think
mm,
what if they take this action, what could be the effect in the from
mm,
the company point of view, but also the consequences into the into the rest of the world. Because if you're doing something that harm your planet, everyone else will have a shortened lifespan because there won't be any more time for us or space for us to be in here. This
mm,
is in a really short way how I can explain how I've tried to embed that. But to be honest with you, I have never heard about the topic of today, which is mutual credit network.
mm,
But when the guy's name is Ada was explaining it, it came to my mind one of an anecdote that my grandpa said to me.
mm,
My granddad, he worked in a little village in Italy. He didn't have the money to buy the house.
mm,
So he agreed all the people in the street where they were building the houses, they say, we're going to build the house. You
Mm.
can pay us in installments. So he didn't do a mortgage as we did, as I did, but it was kind of indirect agreement with, we will do that. You just pay us in installment. He built the house piece by piece. So now it's a huge house, but it started with a 2 bedroom, no, 4 bedroom, four room, and after is a huge house. So I don't know when Adam was saying it's not the same, but I don't know. This is what came into my mind.
Mm. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So let me introduce myself more properly, and then let's dive into this case study, right? So I've been in the accounting profession for somewhere between 18 and 20 some odd years. I can't recall at this point. And I came into the profession through, I would say, somewhat of a back door. I was actually doing nonprofit work in workforce development, job training, and was the communications and development director for an organization that taught low-income and unemployed individuals in New York City how to enter into the profession as accounting professionals and bookkeepers. There's a lot of job training and understanding the marketplace and all that stuff. Long story short, I ended up eventually becoming the CEO of an accounting firm. Ran that firm for 7 years. It was a team of about 25 people. We served hundreds of clients, both nationally and some international organizations that came into the US. And then spent a lot of time in the profession, educating the profession on the adoption of technology, and sort of best practices and stuff. Spoke at a lot of different conferences. Sort of before I came to co-founding the Accounting Alchemy Network. And so I've always been, along my journey, I've always been a very mission-driven person, and sort of curious about how do we have a positive impact through our work as business owners, as nonprofits, et cetera. And so so I think what I'm really drawn to in this conversation of donut economics is, I was in fact on a call with a client earlier this morning, and we were talking about how the difference between working with a business that has a growth for growth mindset versus one that is more concerned with impact and social justice and equity, right? And obviously we prefer to work with the latter, but what it does is it changes it's the mindset that you approach business decision making, right? And for us, on the regenerative side of the accounting profession, it's about tracking more than just the bottom line, and it's about making more than just profits for the owners of the company, right? And so some of the questions that I get curious about in the container of this donut is a couple of things. One, what are the new narratives that emerge that then need to be carried into conversation with clients, right? I spend a lot of time face-to-face interactions with business owners, helping them to think through their decision making around their finances, right? And a lot of accountants are doing that, at least on the operational side. So what kinds of questions do I need to be asking? What sort of different frameworks or ideas do I need to be sharing with the client if they want to approach their business more from a social impact perspective? And then when it comes to measuring things, right, which is one of the skill sets of accountants, and I look at this donut, I think, okay, if I have a client and they care about a particular aspect of this framework, this donut framework, and I am often the sort of steward of tracking and data and management, performance management, results, and all that stuff, then though we might hire somebody separately to track this component of the data, it might often come from my conversations that we need to hire that person to track that data and then ultimately set up some of the systems to support that, because of the way that accountants tend to function, right? As people who are good at tracking data and looking at numbers and spreadsheets and figuring out how all the bits and pieces go together, right? So that's kind of where I'm at. I think one other thing I'll share is I'm now in the process in my own practice. So I have my own consulting practice, and I'm in the process of implementing different aspects of regenerative accounting principles into the businesses of my clients. Some of that looks like, conversate, like some of the things that Adam brought up around like equitable compensation, right? What does a framework for addressing equitable compensation look like? And then all the way through to things more technical, like, okay, if we're going to produce a financial report, how is that data presented from the context of how a chart of accounts is structured, right? And so anyways, so I'm really interested in taking the theory and applying it in whatever degree is humanly possible. So I appreciate the case study. So let's look at this case study. It says here, imagine an emerging local mutual credit network, say in a town of 200 people. What accounting challenges might emerge? Do either of you have any opinions or thoughts on that question, or questions about what's been said so far?
Can you just repeat the question?
Yeah, so considering the case study, the first question was what accounting challenges might emerge for a mutual credit network of a town of 200 people? I can think of a couple things, but
For me, what is a bit a mystery is we are supposed to start with everybody at zero.
Mm.
And then for mathematician,
There you go.
how can we start when you are at zero and you stay at zero? For me, I have some things I don't understand and that slightly block me
Mm.
to get inside.
Mm.
If you hear what I mean by that. But in fact, you need something, you need a base, and when you're base, you can start to play.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Julia, what were you gonna say?
It's not really clear what Vincent said, and I do apologize. But what I was thinking is tracking. As an accountant, the debit side should always equal to the credit side. So the first thing come to my mind is the challenge is how can you track that you've gotten, because okay, you can provide, as I was saying, the bartender, they can come to your pub or club and get as many beers as they want. But at the same time, when the big place where you put the beer is finished, you need to refill it. So you need to have money, or you have to have something that you can use to go in another shop and help you to refill it. So first of all would be a tracking thing, I would say, but also I was thinking also determining, like, kind of valuation, so determining the fair value of the good and the services that you exchange. So you come to me, you buy 10 beers, but I come to your shop and I buy the food for the whole family. How much?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I got you. I got you. So just to go back to what you were saying, Vincent, I think I understand what you're saying, in this concept of starting at zero and needing to start with something. I mean, and the truth is that I mean, in the context of, well, I don't think we ever actually start at zero, right? There, like, because when I think about the donut, I think about, okay, and I think about this community of 200 people, right? It's not that they sort of drop down into a planet that's void of anything, right? So there is water, maybe not enough. There is energy, maybe not in the most regenerative form. There are people with differing skills, but some of those skills will have an immediate and essential impact. Like, people are doctors and nutrition, things like that. And then some people whose skills might not be immediately applicable to solving critical, mission critical problems. But I think that my response to that, Vincent, is, well, I think the first thing that we need to do, and this kind of comes back to what you're saying, Julia, in the context of tracking evaluation, you need to know where you're starting, right? Like, the first thing to do is to take a measurement of now, right? And to understand what you're actually working with. And that alone is actually a pretty big task for a group of 200, a community of 200 people, like really assessing the state of affairs and understanding the need is part of that initial phase. And I do, and I think, Julia, you're pointing to a really important thing. Obviously, accountants track things and evaluate things, right? And so here we're asking, in this context, accountants to be accountable to more than just the currency, right? Or at least how if there is a currency involved, how the currency translates across other types of assets, right? That might not be like typical assets that they're used to tracking. So there's more data, it seems like, involved in this kind of a system. And I think the other thing that is a challenge here, right, is, and I see this all the time in the work that I do with clients, particularly. So I do a lot of work with a lot of clients in the arts sector. They all have varying degrees of understanding of finance, accounting, and this sort of systems thinking. And so I could speak to one client, and I say that because I think one of the things that is required and is ultimately a challenge is transparency and accountability. Well, you can't. I don't think you can have complete transparency and accountability if there isn't sort of a shared understanding of of the language of what we're talking about, right? If you don't understand the language, then how can you hold somebody accountable to what we're doing, right? And if you don't understand it, then what's the point of transparency? It's like, if I can't participate in the conversation, and because I can't see everything, I don't understand everything, then how am I to be able to actually participate? And I think creating transparency and education is an important component of this problem. And it would be a challenge because, it becomes, for me, it becomes a question of like, okay, well, how much finance and accounting knowledge do my clients and their employees need to have for me to facilitate a truly equitable conversation around compensation, right? I think that's something that comes up for me.
Well,
Go ahead.
I'm trying to do a kind of parallel with, I say we say in English, barter.
Mm.
When before the money, we were exchanging stuff.
Mm-hmm.
One as a butcher, the other one was a cook, and they exchange what they do,
Mm-hmm.
which was some or less the same logic, but without money.
Mm.
Here we do it. We have a currency. We have an accounting process. And so that means we have the advantage of the money. We have the advantage of having something that is virtual. So that means, and you could be in credit under as long as you are below you don't reach your limit.
Mm.
So for me, I think this is very could work very well, and probably does not need a lot of explanation to the people, to the 200 people. We could make it a smart presentation about how does it work, and they start slowly. They see that it works, and then they use it. For me, it's not a problem. The problem could be, and it is not necessarily the accounting, but I mean, if the community have not some things to share, if they are all a lawyer, it will not work.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
As a lawyer doesn't need a lawyer. You need somebody that is doing something wrong and something whatever.
Yeah.
And here I don't know if it is somewhere something that is on the shadow of the accounting, or who will have this scanning that it could work. As if the community has nothing to share, we know don't start. Huh?
Well, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and Julia, I think you brought up something else too that Vincent is pointing at in the lawyer to lawyer example. It's like, does 10 beers equal food for the whole family, right? Like, And to me, it comes back to this question of, okay, I think the precursor to this sort of issue, this case study, this problem that we're trying to solve is like, what are the shared values and the core beliefs of this community, right? And I think, Vincent, that goes back to this thing about well, what I'm trying to say. I mean, it goes back to, okay, what is actually important, right? And that I think is why the donut is so valuable, because if all you try to do is figure out within, let's just say your mutual credit network was trying to move the needle on each one of those components of the donut, then it would be, okay, well, what is the measurement for movement, right? What's the indicator that there is a positive or a negative change? And then what actions and behaviors in our culture, in this community, push the needle either in one direction or the other? And then you would look at these examples and say, okay, well, does the 10, it's not so much, well, it's the 10 beers, like, does the 10 beers move the needle? Well, if the answer is no, then does that thing have value in the container of facilitating this like movement towards keeping people in the donut, right? Because they're not the same. I mean, at face value, they're not the same. I have to be fair and say that. But like, if there's a family in the community who would otherwise not get food, in my mind, at least, and it goes back to the core values and beliefs of this community, in my mind, that's one of those things that moves the needle, right? That it's the difference between having that family outside of the donut or inside of the donut versus the person with the beer, where it's like, well, they might just already be in the or unless they have other issues. I don't know. It's complicated. It's definitely complicated.
Can I add to that? So and this is what I like about accounting, is this is why I think rules sometimes help. So if we establish clear rule to help us evaluate and evaluate what the transaction and the limit to those transactions, which is, to be honest with you, when I think about the donut economy, is the boundaries, what is called the boundaries, up until where we can go. Because if we exceed these, we're gonna harm the planet, or we're gonna hurt ourselves. So indirectly, you have everywhere, unfortunately, rules. No one likes the rules, but rules make sure that I think rules sometimes limit the, how can I say, the negative effect. Because everywhere, in every community, you've got the free riders or those who try to get more than what they can, because it's part of the human being. I don't know. I don't know. This is, when you were talking, this is.
As you have a limit, you cannot go above the limit.
Yeah, but if you go above the limit, sometimes going above could be harmful. You can hurt some. This is what I think. This is what I've got when I was studying the donut economy. We set those limits because if we go above, maybe we use too much. I don't know. If you use too much water, you're gonna hurt the environment, and indirectly it will affect you, because in the long term, this is a problem. This is a problem about climate change or biodiversity. We have to think in a long term horizon, not in a short term. So if we're going to use too much water now, okay, it's okay for now, but in the long term, other company think about agricultural one, they cannot survive because water is one of the most, let me call it, raw material that we don't, they're really scarce. So I don't know if allowing people exceeding the limit is good. So you need to show the positive and negative effect. If you donate more food to the family, that's okay. But at the same time, depends. Is always the scenario. I think, Vincent. I think. I'm not an expert. Just thinking.
In this case study, we speak about a community of 200 people. Huh?
Yeah.
So that means, for me, is where I'm a bit lost. That means I don't see a lot of link with the donuts regarding what are the behavior of these people.
Mm.
I just mainly see as it is an accounting process, as the donut is more or less that people should think donuts. So they should have a bit of sobriety. And this is probably what could help the system to work correctly. For sure, if you have only politician or head of company, a CEO that is just doing the short term, it will not work. As they don't follow a rule. They want to go over the limit. But if we are in a donut thinking, we have this respect, this mutual respect, and I think this helps a lot. Where I'm questioning a little bit is I was doing another parallel, as probably you have all used a tree count when you have with friends. One is paying, so it's an accounting. You could have in your phone. You pay the beer for everybody. It's counted. It's shared by the people. And then another one is paying something else. And at the end of the evening or at the end of the holidays, you do the balance and you decide who has to pay for, who has spent more and who has leave on the other. And what is the case here is bit for me quite similar. And I was questioning myself that in the donut thinking, does the accounting do something that is visible to the other, or we keep the secret? In Switzerland, the bank has a secret in theory. So I don't know what is right in this mutual credit network as we are a community.
Yeah. So I'll say one thing, and then we've got to pull ourselves back to the room. This is awesome. Thank you both for participating in this. And I think what's coming up for me is two things. One, like, well, one thing in particular, two things in particular. One thing that accountants do, some accountants, is they put in internal controls, right? Mechanisms to ensure that certain things don't happen, right? And so I think part of the inquiry that gets brought forward in terms of the skill set of an accountant relative to what they're doing inside of this container is what role does accounting play in establishing internal controls so that, Julia, we don't surpass that threshold, right? And make sure that we are actually maintaining this framework. But the other thing that comes into play, and Vincent, you brought this up when you're talking about politicians, right? Any interested specific party that has a particular interest needs a control, right? And so in that regard, you think about like the leadership structure that is required to effectively function in this thing, and it's that sort of sociocratic model of, okay, you've got these circles, and each circle is a steward for something, and then each steward has the responsibility to ensure that frame, that threshold, that control is maintained, and it's almost like the decision making gets distributed through these sort of circles of folks who are responsible for stewarding different aspects of the donut and that specific measure that's a part of that. So it's a lot. So I'm gonna have to get us back to the main hall. So I'm gonna leave the room and then close the halls. And if y'all want to come join me, that would be fabulous. All right, I'll see you in a sec.
Thank you.
Leave breakout room. Hi, Ingrid. Welcome back.
You put me back in room 3. My internet booted me, and I was in the middle of an amazing conversation.
I actually have to bring everybody back.
Oh, I
Yeah.
missed it.
Close all rooms, so sorry.
It was so good.
No worries. And I thought I was
I
worried.
was gonna save the transcript. It was so good. I'm like, articles could come from this, and now it's gone because Zoom started over.
Yeah. We were having some pretty awesome conversations in our room too. It's getting pretty wild. Yeah, I'm glad that all right, so all the rooms are coming back. What was your thought? Do you want to state it here at least so I can hear it?
It's just we were saving the freaking world, and then the internet died.
Okay, got it. Check. That's usually what ends up happening. Oh man.
Gwen and Dennis, my internet died in the middle of our amazing conversation, and I was gonna save the transcript, and now it's gone. I was
It
gonna
was
ask
so
you both. I'm
bad.
like, can I save the transcript? Like articles could be written about the things we're talking about, and then now it's gone.
You were reaching your limit, and suddenly it stopped. Huh? It's accounting that control your internet.
All right, I think we're all coming back now. So thank you all for entertaining this practice. I know I had to figure out what are we talking about exactly, and then get acquainted with my friends. But out of that conversation, some fascinating conversations started to emerge about how we actually can apply this concept of the donut to the work and the skills that we have as accounting professionals. So I'm going to pass the mic back to Adam and Megan, and I'm super curious to hear what came out of these conversations. Over to you.
Yeah, Megan, did you want to go first and talk about what your group discussed, or if you had a different representative that you wanted to nominate, or
Yeah, we didn't have anyone specific that we nominated, but I think maybe I'll just start by saying like our group, we definitely went in lots of different directions and kind of based on kind of the experience of the folks in the room. So I just want to like reiterate the fact that like please I want to open up like to hear from everyone like individually and kind of like what's come like bubbling up for you, what kind of were some of the themes in the room. I was in a room with Rowan and Bob. I think a few of the things that were like the importance of trust and like the terms of entry into the community and how we kind of maybe get out of our isms of like our historical racism, classism, like how do we kind of create communities that are inclusive as we move into these sort of systems that are built on trust? How do we build trust beyond just maybe the people who look like us or were used to being around? And bioregional like connections that also came up, how kind of moving our mindsets from from competition to collaboration and the challenges and that when we're so programmed or we've been brought up in a certain way. So those are just a few themes that came up in my room, but I wanted to pass it on to others, Rowan and Bob, if you want to talk more about those, but also I wanted to just open it up to everyone. If what is was there a word that's kind of like top of mind for you or feeling that's top of mind for you at the moment?
I think the conversation around value, how do we value our contributions to the network? The accounting field has gone from hourly to a lot of accountants now doing value-based pricing, which also can have its challenges in both extremes, whether we don't value ourselves enough and we feel bad asking for what we're worth, or we overvalue to the point where we price people out. And how do we manage our concepts of what value is?
Thanks. Yeah, we talked about value in our group as well in terms of like what gets valued and how. I think one of my biggest takeaways was two things. One, we talk about the skill sets of the accountant, right, and the applicability of that to the work that we're dealing with here, And the term that came up for me was internal controls, right? Every accountant knows that term and understands the concept of internal controls. And so here we're looking at these sort of thresholds of tolerance for staying inside of this donut. And then the other thing that we talk about a lot at the AAN is the concept of sociocracy, the leadership model that is needed to facilitate an equitable an equitable progression towards shared outcomes. And so you pair a sociocratic leadership model with a system for internal controls with units of measure that are defined for each of these different components of the donut. And all of a sudden you've got a system that just might be able to keep people in the donut, right? Which I'm excited about. So yay, accountants. Internal controls. Woo!
As someone who is not familiar with that, I'd be excited to learn more about that at some point and like how that interacts with some of these the ideas within the donut. I think Adam and I not having necessarily the accounting background, you all, I think we're trying to make these connections, but the more you all can help like follow up at like in this conversation we're having now and even follow up after, like helping me to understand like how we kind of bridge this gap and kind of utilize this history and knowledge of accounting that's something I'm excited to learn more about.
Ingrid, go for it.
Yeah, I want to just, I guess, stem off that idea of value that you were just talking about, Matthew, as we had some really good discussion around that in our group with Dennis and Gwen, which I got kicked off at the very end. My internet died. So I was like, I want to save the transcript. I feel like articles could come out of this amazing conversation. But Gwen, I think, really hit the nail on the head when she was talking about this different shifting perspective of looking at accounting from a philosophical view versus a logical view. And I think that that's one of the tricky things that we're dealing with is that the parts of the brain used when we think about accounting generally are more linear. But when we shift to a donut perspective and we start taking in circular systems that take all life into account, it shifts things. And accounting, when it comes right down to it, is a story that people made up. By its very nature, it is subjective. The value and worth of everything around us is individual to each of us, and that is a choice that we get to make. And so assigning a set value to anything ends up breaking the system down and becomes, by its very nature, inequitable because then the value is being dictated by whoever it is that gets to decide what the value is. And so trying to figure out how to shift the conversation and especially looking at the amazing questions that were in the chat before I got kicked off of Zoom, but there was one around what challenges are presented. And I really love what you wonderful donut folks were talking about earlier around accounting being one of the earliest records of language in humanity. And just it dawned on me that what we're encountering here is not an accounting issue, it's a communication issue. That accounting is there to make up for the fact that for some reason humans are having a really hard time speaking their needs and being in effective, healthy, reciprocal relationship with each other and having good consent conversations, recognizing that, ooh, when I place this amount of value on something, someone else is going to get upset because they place a different value on that. And we have a difference in opinion. And how do we have this conversation without starting a war? So figuring out how to overcome these communication differences and recognizing that those differences are philosophical, not logical. And the more we try to dehumanize them by turning them into a math equation, the more we're perpetuating the problem. So how do we shift our communication and recognize that the foundation underneath all of this needs to be effective holistic health within each of us? In ourselves and branching that out into our families and the lives around us, and then into our businesses, and then supporting our clients in doing that for themselves, and just shifting it out of the profit for profit's sake mindset that there's so much more that we can be measuring here than just money and finance. And Dennis had some really great ideas about all of that. It's just my mind is exploding with all these ideas. Thank you all.
That very passionate set of words, Ingrid, has really inspired me. Um, I really am interested in that idea of, like who's setting the value, right? And I think, when we think of markets, we think of kind of like that over financialized, like very, Wall Street capitalistic idea of like this is how markets are used and what they're useful for. And I think that we should be trying to like reclaim markets a little bit in the sense that they can be a very effective democratic way of setting value, right? If the market participants all have equal amounts of power. And I think the problem that we've seen in markets is that they're too easily turned into an autocratic like decision on what the value of anything is. And so if we can find ways to kind of like reclaim that democracy within markets, that would be a really cool uh, opportunity, I think. I guess I can also speak a little bit more to what we talked about in our room, unless anyone else wants to jump in. One really interesting idea that we were discussing a lot was the fact that one challenge to a mutual credit network and perhaps like accounting more broadly is that we exist within many layered contexts all at once, right? We have our household, we have our neighborhood, we have the city or town that we live in, we have the country that we live in, right? And there are different like policy regimes at each layer. And the way that those regimes interact with our ability to, transact across those layers and within those layers makes it a really complicated mess to institute something like new or different around that. And I don't know that we necessarily came to any good answers, but it was a very, at least for me, it unlocked a different perspective on how I was looking at the challenges that we face in, making systemic change. So I thought that was cool. Ben, did you want to talk more about your trust and safety angle too? That was another interesting comment.
Yeah, it stems into a lot of what Ingrid said, as well as what you just reframed and summarized. The bridge, we're in an existing system that has all these multi layers and nested layers and all this, and makes it a mess, as you put it. And so, where does it start? What's a practical first step? And Alina was kind of pointing to that with some of the shifts that she's done. And for me, I just really echoed on it. It starts with the self. If you can't manage your own person, how you hell you going to manage somebody else? And so it starts with that inner journey of governance and fairness and relationalness in a relational sense to yourself. And that once you really can expand on that, you start into more safe spaces. And I kept using the word safe because for me, relational or psychological, social psychology, the idea that we are in relationship, whether it's with ourselves or others, or the whole, is the first fundamental building block of that is trust. And that was really coming out in the donut presentation as well, and what the whole thing is based on. And so trust lends yourself a sense of safety and security. And if you are not physically safe, nor are you psychologically safe, you can't do this work. So I'm kind of like really set there, and it's hard to move me off of that spot because of my own personal experience. but also a lot of my own research and thinking. And so when we were talking about the complexity of all of it and trying to say, well, where are we? We kind of went down a rabbit hole. For me, it brings it back to the sense of it starts with the one, right? Yourself to the one all. Right. And so it is this journey. So that's just kind of like it was in the room and it keeps coming back for me a lot in that in order to make a move from something to somewhere, you have to have courage. And that is the opposite of fear. That is the opposite of and that requires this container of safety or security or trust at the end of the day. So I think that that's kind of the fundamental building block of what we're playing with here.
Yeah, I'll say a few more things, and then I want to make sure that anybody that would like to speak, please feel free to raise your hand because we have a couple more minutes left. I want to make sure anybody that has something to say has the time to say it. I think one of the things that came up for me, Vincent was and Julia were in my group, and Vincent sort of sparked this curiosity. For me, it was the concept of starting with zero and like where are we at? Where are we starting, right? And I think one of the things, and I keep thinking about like the applicable skill sets of the accountant relative to solving the problem. And so one of the things that came out of that inquiry of where are we starting is, okay, well, accountants have to always assess where we start, right? We don't just like jump into something and willy-nilly it. Like accountants are really good at evaluating the situation that we're in and going through sort of a pretty rigorous process of looking at, okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? Where's the data for that? Where's the data for this? Do we have the backup for that? Do we have the documentation? What is the measurement that we're looking for? And so I think including accountants in an assessment and evaluation process, just by nature of their sort of natural skill set and their brain power, I think is an important component of this experience. And then as a result of that, right, it's the whole measurement thing, right, of being able to create systems that measure data. And I think that the other thing that came up for me, well, and then sorry, the other thing that came up, and Julia brought this forward because of her work as an educator, is how, I'm also thinking about the future generation of accounting professionals, and there's a big challenge right now in the profession around the next generation, and the fact that we are having problems with attracting talent to this profession through the education system. And I start thinking like, oh, okay, well, that's because the education that we're offering is this maybe it's this sort of older model of business as usual. And so what could it look like to invite students, young accounting students, into an inquiry around, hey, you realize that your skill set could help to solve some of these other issues that are going on in our culture and our society. And I think I don't know, I just think that's a really cool opportunity to think about how we educate the next generation of accountants, because they will be the ones that then come forward and hopefully apply some of these principles to a broader audience and population. So we have a couple more minutes. Anybody else have any burning thoughts, comments, questions, ideas, thoughts they want to place on the table before we do our wrap up? Okay. Chris.
If no one else is gonna say something, I apologize for coming late. I could not tear myself away from the Power Station film that started an hour earlier and overlapped this one, so highly recommend that. And I guess one of the things I was going to be looking for in joining this group, I'm not an accountant or anything, more of a filmmaker, but let me just put a thought out there. Just the conundrum to me of everything when I try to boil things down is life requires growth, but there's a life curve and a death curve. And the infinite growth on a finite planet is the death curve, if you were to plot it. And along with that, people have difficulty with big numbers, income inequality, billionaires. So often I find myself trying to translate big numbers in a different way, turning it into years or something. For example, there's a reason we don't grow 10,000 feet tall. Or wait a minute, I didn't do the math. 100,000 feet? How big would we grow? There's an accountant challenge for you. I recently made a little billionaire's wage. If a billionaire went from 1 to 2 billion in a year, and let's pretend like they made a wage, ask people how much do they make an hour? Memorize it and have it ready for casual conversation. It's $500,000 an hour, $4 million every day, no matter how hard they work. It's really an interesting thing to contemplate. With that, it gets down to, for me, what is missing with the idea of growth in economics is we're missing the maturity phase. So I don't know. Those are just thoughts that I keep boiling down and trying to insert. So thanks for letting me have a last minute.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Yeah, one of my big takeaways from what you shared, and I have more questions than answers per se, but this idea of like storytelling. I mean, the truth is accountants are often the ones responsible for interpreting the numbers, right, to audiences, communities, clients, et cetera. And so if we're speaking in numbers that don't mean anything to people, and how is that helping to shift the narrative, right? But if we can learn to translate these numbers in a meaningful, that hourly rate example is a perfect example of like, oh, wow, that makes it clear, right? That makes it so clear. So that's the story to be sharing and telling. So I thank you for that. All right. So
yeah, one more little tidbit on that in terms of, I think my math is right. I might be misspeaking here a little bit, but a person, a day's wage of a billionaire, how long would it take a $15 an hour person to make that wage? Now, I may be off on one of my metrics there, but it's 133 years.
Heard. Numbers in this case do not lie. Thank you.
Right.
All right. So thank you all for your time today. Megan and/or Adam, would you like to make any other final statement or share where folks can find out about you before we close up?
Yeah, I just want to say, feel free to email me. I posted it in the chat, adam@civicdev.org. If you have any questions or follow up or want to connect on LinkedIn, I'm usually happy to talk about these things. And we also had some additional reading and resources in our deck that we didn't get to, but we'll make sure that Matthew sends that out in the follow up.
Cool.
Yeah, Megan, if you had wanted to say anything.
Yeah, I was just posting in the chat the Donut Economics Action Lab, which has a bunch more resources. Like I said, there's these donut days that are going on right now. So there's lots of like live online events happening the next couple of days. And then there's like a bunch of resources if you want to read and learn more, but also feel free to reach out, as Adam said.
All right. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Adam. And thank you all for those of you who stayed through the whole thing. We appreciate it. Now go out there and help our planet be a better place. And we appreciate you all. And if you have any questions, reach out. You know how to find me, at least. I'm sure you got my contact. And come swing on by the Accounting Alchemy Network and have a beautiful day. All right.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
All. Bye-bye.
Nice meeting you all.
Yep.
Thank
Ciao.
you. Bye.